and a great topic that I think is pretty fortuitous. It's been in the media quite a bit recently, with Google giving across the board 10% raises to all their employees, and Facebook poaching an engineer from Google. There's a lot to be said about this topic. To start with, though, I have some bad news and some good news. It turns out that at the last minute, our intended keynote speaker, Commissioner Robert Walsh, was unable to attend, but I was able to reach out to Andrew Rasiej, who's the founder of the Personal Democracy Forum, a big technology advocate here in New York, chairman and I think one of the co-founders of the New York Tech Meetup, and has a lot to say about technology here in New York. So I'd like to give Andrew a few minutes here to give our keynote.
Thank you. Hey everybody. I was delayed not because of the traffic and the crowds outside. I was delayed because when I saw the traffic and the crowds, I immediately started coding an app to make it easier for people to be able to get here. And I see they succeeded because you're all here tonight to join us. I'm an optimist about New York City, and have lived in New York my entire life, started several businesses, many of them in the analog space before I got involved in technology. And as much as we all love technology, and those of us who are in the room obviously are here because we have an interest and an affinity for it, I want to just remind everybody that it's brand new. It just came out of the box. Just to give you a couple of kind of examples of what I mean. In 1997, I helped start a nonprofit organization called Mouse, which wires public schools against inner city kids online. And in 1997, in the New York City public schools, there were in many of them, there weren't even any computers connected to the internet. In fact, a school was considered connected to the internet in 1997 if one teacher had an AOL account. If you got a business card from somebody in 1997 and didn't have an email address on it, you wouldn't have been surprised, because not many people were using email. If you opened up the New York Times and saw a full-page ad by a Fortune 500 company, the website address would be in the lower right-hand corner in the smallest possible letters. And Jack Welch, who was the president of GE, was claiming that the internet was a fad and was going to go away. Well, where are we in 13 years? What's happened since 1997 to today? Well, there isn't a Fortune 500 company in the world that hasn't figured out how to connect its employees, customers, and suppliers to 24-hour networks, where literally, if you were to buy a digital camera case from Sony, when you press click, the cow knows it. Because the leather manufacturer is getting an email letting them know that there's a demand. More importantly, even though we've got a wired world in the Fortune 500 realm, the city of New York has still a long way to go. In 2005, I had the distinct pleasure of running for an office here, many of you may know, called the Public Advocate's Office. It's the second in line to the mayor. And I ran on a platform to make New York City wireless, which I thought was an innovative idea. And I didn't have Facebook, I didn't have YouTube, I didn't have Twitter to help me along. I had a couple of blogs, and I had some technology engineers who built a site, for example, that allowed people to take pictures of potholes and post it on a Google map, and a few other innovative ideas. But I didn't really realize how disconnected I was from the future of New York until I went to the New York Times editorial board for my endorsement interview. And when I walked in, they said, "Oh, you're the Wi-Fi guy." I said, "Yes." And then they said, "Could you tell us what that is, please?" Seriously, I had to spend half an hour of my 45 minutes at the New York Times editorial board in 2005 explaining to them what Wi-Fi was. Often I would run into politicians in my work, either running for office or advocating for Mouse, and I tried to explain to them the potential of technology, and I got lots of nods and pats on the back saying these are all great ideas, and then I got phone calls asking me to give them thousands of dollars in donations. And I realized that that even to this day, and that still happens, that most politicians still don't know the difference between a server and a waiter. Just take a look at the average age of the U.S. Senate and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. But the reason why I'm optimistic about New York is that we've seen, since 1997, we've seen two waves of technology innovation. The term, how many of you have heard of Silicon Alley? So most of you. So It was named that in the late 90s and early 2000s before the bubble burst, because there was a great deal of money going into startups in New York, and many people were very excited. And of course, as soon as the bubble burst, everybody became very unexcited. But technology continued to advance, and although many of the small companies that got started in the late 90s and early part of this decade did go away, the entrepreneurial energy didn't stop. And recently, in the 3 years, a new Silicon Alley has emerged. It's obviously represented here to some degree because you're interested in this subject, but an organization that I just recently was named chairman of, wasn't a founder, but was close to the people who did found it, called the New York Tech Meetup, now has over 15,000 members. And we get together once a month, just for an hour and a half, so that we can do a shell and do 5-minute demos for each other of what we're working on. And the interesting thing about it is that it's verboten to ask a question about what the business model is at any of these tech meetups. If you ask that question, you'll get booed by the audience. And we have all kinds of companies, whether they be in the commercial space or whether they be in the media space, retail space, fashion, entertainment, travel, or even just engineers working on databases or interesting code. They'll come, they'll showcase, they'll meet up with others interested in working with them, they'll network, and in many cases they'll find some money or they'll find resources that they can use to help them build their businesses. But the biggest difference between what I witnessed in the first wave of Silicon Alley and the second wave is that it's almost as if the money is secondary. In the first wave, it was all about getting a VC to fund you, getting a big valuation, getting yourself on a trajectory for an IPO. We had a couple of IPOs here back then, one called EarthWeb that went for $65 billion on its first day. The Globe, I don't know if any of you remember the Globe, another one that was ridiculously overvalued. And so there was that was 1997, but now it seems that people are realizing that you need money, but we need something else. We need talent. At every one of the meetups where somebody is doing a demo, invariably 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5 at the end of the demo, the presenter will turn to the audience and say, "We're hiring. If you're a PHP developer, or you're a marketer, or you're somehow involved in technology, we're interested in talking to you because we're hiring." And there has become more and more obviously to us in New York a major gap in the pipeline of talent, that can bring talent to the companies to help rebuild New York in the 21st century. There's an opportunity to actually reinvent New York. This is a city that became very successful in the 20th century, and to a large degree, that's one of its benefits, but also one of its great challenges, because it's been so successful in the 20th century. The bureaucracies, the systems, the hierarchies, the people who run most of the verticals or the silos of power in New York really got their success from business models and relationships and networks that they formed in the 20th century. And to superimpose 21st century thinking on an infrastructure that was successful in the 20th is actually very, very hard. So New York City doesn't have, unfortunately, a Stanford University producing relationships between students and VCs to the degree that it should. It has. Obviously, Columbia is doing some work in this area. NYU is trying to do some work in this area, but we're not quite at the level of institutions like Stanford or MIT in marrying the relationship between academia, entrepreneurship, and finance in order to create the next generation of companies that will lead New York into the 21st century. We also have a huge problem in our education system. Even though Mouse got started 13 years ago, and we've wired many schools, and there are many kids in our program. I think we're in about 150 schools in New York. The average kid in a New York City public school still gets to spend only about 1 hour a week with a networked computer in a school. And some of them have computers at home, but the digital divide isn't really around the hardware. It's frankly around the fact that the broadband to bring the internet at a reasonable speed into someone's home is costing $60, $70, $80 a month. And for a working class family, that, you know, the $700, $800 a year is more than they can afford. So we, as entrepreneurs, even though we're trying to build our businesses, we have to think about some of the infrastructure issues that support our businesses and will deliver the employees and the customers that we may be trying to serve in the future. And one of the reasons why I was very excited about this particular event is that I see this event as a marriage between not only the Tech Council and the New York Tech Meetup to sort of synergize and figure out where we can work together to evangelize the technology community and to support the technology community, but also to bring it closer to the city of New York itself. The agency that you just heard about, Rob Walsh's agency, which is specifically designed to support small businesses, is not actually as connected to our industry as it should be. And also the general small business community of New York isn't as connected to the technology industry as it could be. Many of the companies that are working in the tech industry or are part of the New York Tech Meetup would love to know about your companies, the challenges that you have, and help solve them, service them, or figure out some other way to partner. So I stated at the beginning that I'm an optimist. I just want to leave you with one story about a demo that was done at a New York Tech Meetup to give you a sense of the talent that's in this city and what the future holds for our city and for our country and potentially for the world. As I mentioned at the Tech Meetup, there's always these demos that we do. They're 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and we're pretty strict to it. Anybody who tries to do a marketing pitch usually gets booed off the stage. It's really show us the demo, show us the demo. And one day, a couple of months ago, there was a young man from a company called Twilio. Has anybody ever heard of Twilio? So 2 or 3 people. So Twilio is, for those of you who don't know, is think of it as a phone company in the cloud. If those of you know what a PBX system is, the box on your wall in your office, well, if you had Twilio, you don't need that anymore. All your extensions for your employees, all their voicemail, all their text messaging, all the conference calling, and all the analytics associated with how they use it is all available and manageable through the cloud, through the internet or through mobile devices. And the CTO of Twilio got on front of the stage and announced and apologized to the audience and said, "Sorry, I don't have a demo today." We were a little surprised. But he said, "Don't worry, I'll just design one right now." And so he started literally typing code on stage. We were sitting there staring, watching all this gobbledygook on the screen running by. Someone raises their hand about 15, 20 seconds into it, reminds him that he forgot a semicolon. So there was a code written more than he did. And about 60 seconds into the demo, a phone number appears. And when that phone number appeared, he asked everybody to reach out into their pockets, pull out their phones, and dial that phone number. Well, we all did. And about 15 seconds later, all 1,000 of us in the room were connected to each other by a conference call without having to press any other buttons. Of course, our mouths dropped. We were like, wow, that's pretty cool. So he asked us to hang up, which we did. And then he displayed all our phone numbers on the screen. So our mouths dropped even more. And then he smiled, and he pressed the button, and all our phones rang. Now, the audience that night, as you can imagine, went nuts. And they had a reason to go nuts. They just saw a great demo, a really terrific demo. I think all those of us who were veterans all thought it was the best demo we'd ever seen. But I maintain that the reason why everyone was so excited was not just because they saw that demo. That demo validated for them that this generation of young people who are writing this code, who are building these companies, believe that they are in fact writing the architecture of the future, the code of the future. They understand the world as a networked organism. And they, yes, are looking to make money, but they believe that they're going to be able to build a better world than the one that we've had before. And that is the reason why you should be optimistic about your companies, you should be optimistic about technology, and together, between our organizations and the people in this room.
Thank you very much, Andrew. For those of you that haven't been to a New York Tech Meetup yet, I strongly urge you to check it out. It's a pretty unique experience here in New York. Andrew can tell you all about it and attest to it. That was a great segue with your story, so I would ask that you please all turn your cell phones off, lest we have a demonstration of equal talents. And let me introduce tonight our panel, and we'll get started. Starting with Conor, who's going to be our moderator for the evening. We also have Julie to his left from Solvate. We have Terry in the middle from Sapphire, and to Terry's left we have Tom from Dice.com, and each of them in turn will give you a more detailed introduction. So with that, let me turn it over to Conor, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, so I think it's appropriate at this point to it's appropriate for me to, with this turnout, to have a shameless plug on NYC Business Solutions. It's like some of the services that we offer are extremely relevant to small businesses in New York City. Our services, we have to kind of work with what we have, but we have been given an opportunity to work with small businesses to give us a level of optimism as well. So the main services that we offer are in the area of pre-recruitment services, like Don mentioned, as well as access to financing assistance, as well as training funds, as well as assistance with legal advice. So we look at do contract review, help with legal structure, as well as other things. So we have worked with and I think the main aim that we have is to try and take some of the burden of a small company like your own, and so you guys can focus on revenue and can focus on creative ideas like the one I just mentioned. So I'd just like to turn this over to Julie and maybe you do an introduction of yourself and your company.
Sure. Gotta turn this bad boy on. Hello?
Hello. Shout out to all the ladies here. Nice to see you. I'll give a brief intro on me and then on Solvate. Are we good now?
Yeah.
Because I think it's totally relevant. I'm a transplant from San Francisco. I got a little bored out there and wanted to start a startup and moved to New York and thought it would be a more exciting place to be. I'm not a techie by any means, and so I said, where's my place in this ecosystem? Before that, I was an anthropologist studying the subject of Carnival. I've been a journalist in 3 countries, done some weird stuff around digital advertising and video distribution and grocery data analysis as well. And I mention all these points because I've always been confronted with, Julie, what are you? What do you do? And I think I'm somewhat emblematic of a new generation of professionals that is not so tied to what our careers are or our specific job functions, but are trying to find a voice to express our many different abilities. You can be a yoga instructor and a Fulbright scholar and a McKinsey alum. I think all of us know people who have that kind of diversity and wealth of experiences. So what we've tried to do at Solvate, Solvate's a startup based in Tribeca. We're venture-backed proudly by 2 firms in New York. And we've built a business talent network of sorts of some of the absolute best freelancers in the country, freelancers, consultants, professionals operating independently. And we've been trying to give voice to all of the different things that they can do, which is not just a job title for these guys, and it's not just one specific area of industry expertise. So we've taken care of some unsexy stuff that usually gets in the way of hiring contractors, like the contract and who pays who when and how do we know this is all going to work out, and have served, I think, very much as a kind of a business matchmaking agency to try to connect the dots. I will elaborate later on my thoughts on the full-time paradigm, but think very strongly that 20 million non-employer firms in the U.S. are underserved by full-time. They don't have access to full-time resources anyway. They didn't even lay anybody off in the recession, and they deserve better access to professionals like the big companies get. So I will stop there. Turn it on over.
Thank you, Julie. Terry O'Leary. I represent Sapphire Technologies. We are part of Randstad, which is the 2nd largest HR services company in the world. Sapphire is the IT services arm. We focus on staff augmentation, which is your consulting or freelancers, direct hire. We also have a solutions practice and an ERP practice. I too, like Andrew, am very optimistic. The market is increasingly busy. We are seeing growth in all sectors in hiring, and there is a war for talent out there. So it's exciting to be in a busy economy now, finally, and we look forward to sharing our thoughts.
Great. And I'm Tom Silver.
Microphone on, can you hear me back there? Okay, yeah, great. So I'm Tom Silver. I am a Senior Vice President in North America with Dice.com. This is one of my very important customers, so everybody's very nice to him. So I've been with Dice.com for just around 10 years or so. I was actually with Dice shortly after a company that Andrew referred to, EarthWeb. It was actually our parent company, and that was an example, I'll use your term, of a bad business model. So that company crashed and burned literally in 1999, 2000, and was left standing with the job board, Dice.com. So here we are now, roughly, almost 10 years later, and the reason why Dice.com makes a lot of sense is that we are a large employment website, the largest employment website for technology professionals in the country. We have close to 2 million tech professionals that come to the site each month. We service technology employers and recruiters, over 7,000 of them, if not more, on any given month, who are coming looking to interact with a very vibrant technology professional community. So for those of you that are looking to hire and find top tech talent, come to Dice.com. We can certainly help you. We have a very interesting perspective on the marketplace. We sit in the middle of a very vibrant community of tech pros that come to look at close to 70,000 jobs each and every month. Each of those jobs lasts on the Dice.com website only about 15 days or so. By that time, most of our customers have gotten the kind of look at the talent they want. As the talent comes in and looks at the jobs, they apply for the jobs, and most of our employers are happy with the kinds of people that they're finding and they take the job down. Tech pros come to interact with each other. They come to exchange ideas about what's happening in the tech marketplace. They come and look at the job. They look at the information that they can find about the job. If they're going to go for hit up their boss for a raise, they want to see some of the job posting information. And they then can find that and use that information against the boss the next day and say, oh, across the street, this guy's actually paying a lot more than I'm getting paid. Employers and recruiters, you know about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell them some secrets here tonight. Employers and employers come and look at the site, as I said, they find top technology talent and some of the most difficult and hard to fill types of skills. Skills like networking, security, programming, Java programming, other types of programming we referred to before. Interestingly enough, we're seeing more and more demand now for people that have mobile skills. So those tech pros come and look at those types of positions on Dice, and employers and recruiters come and find them. So we're glad to be here tonight, and we look forward to having a conversation tonight.
Thanks, Tom. So I think the economy and hiring is something on everyone's minds at the moment, and I think, Tom, you would be a good man to give some indication as to opening rates for positions, and maybe some information on pay rates for those positions. You see it as a comparison before the recession hit in.
Yeah, so at Dice.com, we run a salary survey every year. We actually, on a national basis, we get about anywhere from 15,000 to 20,000 responses per year. In which case, we've seen over the past few years that tech salaries nationally have been around $80,000 a year, relatively flat, which is actually a bit of a change. Tech pros, for the most part, they like getting raises year over year, but that didn't happen last year. In New York specifically, not surprisingly, the average is actually a little bit higher. So for full-time positions in New York, the average salary was actually $86,000 a year, so well above average. That, too, was relatively flat. Interestingly enough, though, the job count, that number of jobs that are actually posted in the New York market, is close to 9,000 positions on Dice.com today. It's up about 35% versus where it was a year ago. So we'd expect to see that as the demand for tech talent starts to increase, as evidenced by the job count, we also would expect to see the salaries to increase. When we run our salary survey next year, in January, we'll get a better sense of what's happening. But we'd expect those full rates to go up.
Great. Maybe, Terry, you could give some information on, so that's the job opening rates, but how are the hiring rates going?
Our business in New York specifically is up 36% year on year. A majority of that is in the temp space, but we have seen the perm hiring pick up, and that's up almost 45%. Now, that'd be expected in a recession. The flexible model is enjoyed a lot more frequently, and we're actually seeing now a greater demand carry into the next year because there is some uncertainty in some sectors. So the flexible model is becoming more popular, and you don't have to organically develop that skill set in-house. You can utilize it for as long as you need it, and then ramp down when you're done with it. But we are seeing the rates go up, and this, to Tom's point, as the demand grows, and people start saying, hey, my phone's ringing 3 or 4 times. Now I want, 75 an hour instead of 70. So you will see the rates creep up, and we are seeing our pay rates and our charge rates go up about 3% from the first quarter to this quarter, to give you an idea how quickly it's happening. And this is following a year where it was very common to actually have a 10% reduction. Companies were looking for ways to save money. From a volume of jobs, in New York last year, through DICE and through another one of our partners, I did some analysis. There were 50,000 jobs posted just in IT from January to October. This year, they're already up to 69,000. So those are just postings, not fill rates, but it's pretty telling that the market is picking up.
Okay. Well, what type of information could you provide the audience in terms of, like, say, a lot of small businesses, and they're interested in, taking time to choose between perm and a temporary employee. What would you say the pros and cons are, the one of the benefits?
I would say, in a lot of our customers, from my experience, if this is going to be an ongoing need, then permanent is a more economical solution. If it is a project-based need, then the temp is probably a better solution. With your healthcare costs, statutory costs associated with hiring someone, if it is truly a project, then you're better off with the temp. And then there are a multitude of services out there, Julie's company, Sapphire, and that would be able to help you out. And the time saved by going that route, you wouldn't have to go into spending weeks dedicating 2 hours a day to hiring. But you would have a professional that would have someone at your desk probably in a couple of hours.
So Julie, maybe you want to weigh in on that in terms of the project-based workers?
Versus?
Just the advantages for what you would say?
Versus?
Yeah, full-time or contracted.
I mean, can you guys hear me without this?
Yeah.
I've been told I project. Look, for small businesses, I think it's an obvious, God, if you're in a position to hire someone, you should all clap and celebrate it, but that's not usually the case. So we are big fans of, date before you get married. For those of you who've worked in a small business, if you're talking about hiring 1/5 of your workforce, or 1/10 of your workforce, or 1/3 of your workforce, you've got a whole lot of other considerations beyond what's the salary and the skill set. Are they a culture fit? Are they can throw a wrench in the equation or help the business be compelled forward? And so it lines up with some of my thoughts perhaps on the institution of marriage as well, but definitely think that that's a much healthier way to get started. Occasionally clients will ask us to source somebody full-time for them and say, whoa, not really what we do, but we encourage you to see if you can find someone and test out the relationship for a bit, and are big fans of that direction.
All right, cool. So then also, I think we're all trying to be in the spirit of optimism, Andrew. We have to think forward towards 2011. So what kind of guidance could you give us on predictions for 2011, how your businesses will perform and what small businesses can hope for? Tom, do you want to explain?
Yeah, certainly. As we talk to our customers, both larger ones as well as smaller ones, they too share the feeling of optimism. You're telling us that some of the projects that they've put off for perhaps a year, maybe even longer, they need to do. So they're looking to hire. We've actually seen the percentage of positions that full-time, part-time mix has actually shifted slightly more towards full-time. So based upon the fact that many companies had to, because of the state of the environment at the time, they had to put off some projects. They now realize they need to do those. That coupled with more people being more optimistic about getting married as opposed to dating. We're fairly optimistic about some of the trends that we've seen over the past 6 to 12 months continuing into 2011.
I would concur with Tom. I just went through our budget exercises for next year, and they're expecting a minimum of a 12% growth in our business, which is pretty substantial when you consider the size of our North American presence. So we're expecting this to continue. We're hiring internally to match that demand. So we're adding 10% within the New York market.
Okay, so just wanted to go back there to a question on small business. I'm sure a lot of small businesses here would like to know when is the right time for a company on a small business on a shoestring budget. When do you think is the right time that they should hire somebody?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, every company has its own economics. You would have to base it off of, is there a need out there? Is there some business to be captured based on that hire? I think of capacity and efficiency. And if you are efficient and if you reach capacity, it's time. But if you're not growing, you're dying. So In a small business, it's very difficult, and although I'm part of a very large organization, we have an operating environment as such that we manage each office individually. And you get a sense of, like, geez, you know, I'm a salesperson 1 second, I'm recruiting, you know, at night, I'm doing the marketing, you know, on the side. So I understand what it's like, and when you reach that capacity, geez, I'm losing business, I think that it's time for me to give you a number or a revenue number. It would be difficult because I have to understand more about each business.
Understood. So I think you hire a lot of technologists at Solvate. Maybe you would be the best person to discuss would you recommend any type of formula for hiring if you're looking to hire new people in terms of sourcing, timing, etc.?
Boy, if I walked you through the melodrama of us trying to find full-time hires in the tech space for Solvate, it would take us quite a long story. But if I could shift the question slightly and address what I think is a bit of a different market than the one you guys are dealing with, the question of can you hire or not, and tying to the optimism point as well, and your point on capacity. If we look at non-employer firms in the U.S., I guess that's the census's definition of firms who have never hired a full-time employee. Don't know where that line ends and the contingent workforce begins, but we're talking about people who either aren't working for an employer, but are also not hiring any employees, but they're also not unemployed. And actually, if you mesh all the numbers together in a very unscientific way, the number of people who are working in the workforce independently is likely double the number of unemployed people in this country. So we look at all these guys and say, okay, they don't have hiring capacity. Full-time doesn't work for these millions and millions of businesses or your cousins and aunts and friends who are freelancers, right, or who are part of small firms. So I think for these guys, it's a question of not saying, when am I ready to hire full-time, but to try to break people out of the paradigm of saying, I can't hire full-time, so I guess I should do everything on my own. And we sit there and try to figure out everything from our HR to, oh, how do I build this thing and fix my WordPress blog, and 50 other things are really pedestrian problems that the guy down the road could probably help you with, but we're not connected to work peer-to-peer. We're connected to work employee to enterprise. If I had one hope for I think 2011 is a bit optimistic. I hope that we start to have a shift in our thinking about resources for our businesses, for these millions of businesses that don't fit into this other model. And I hope that we can expect and look for access to those resources, whether it's somebody to help you out with a 2-hour problem or a 50-hour project or whatever that thing is.
Okay, so I'd just like to move the conversation over. So Don made a mention there of the impact of social networks on both the small businesses hiring themselves, but also on business models for Sapphire as well as Dice. So I suppose, Tom, what impact have you seen on say, like LinkedIn or Facebook on your business model? Has it been adverse or has it been something else?
Well, we actually work very closely with the social networks, and actually Dice recently introduced a new service which we call the Dice Talent Network, which really seeks to take some of the networking and some of the connecting and some of the following capabilities associated with networking, with social networks, and integrating that into our Dice.com website. And we find that actually works fairly well, both for employers as well as for candidates, because now they both have the chance to interact with each other like they would in a social networking environment, but they're already at a site like Dice.com because they're at least interested in hearing about employment opportunities, which as a result the interaction is very career-oriented. And some of the things we've heard about LinkedIn, for example, is that some of those conversations may or may not be necessarily career-oriented. What we heard from our employers, and we heard from candidates was, I want to go to a site where they know who I am, it's relevant to me as a technology professional, or for employers and recruiters looking to hire them, because I'm already in that mindset. Yet give me some of that capability, that following, that connecting. So when I'm interested in hearing about opportunities from specific companies, I can hear about that. Or I'm interested in reaching out or raising my hand and telling a company that I'm interested in them, they can reach out to me in a way that's more relevant to me. So we actually find that employers and recruiters like to use social networks for social networking, and that's great. But they also like to use sites like ours because it has a specific vertical or industry-specific orientation for those people that are really interested in speaking about careers. So we've actually found that, we thank LinkedIn for giving us some ideas. We might be able to and integrating some of that into our capability. So we've actually found it to be very helpful for our job seekers as well as for our employers.
What would you say about employers who really, have a preference on employing passive candidates? So they can find them on LinkedIn, but passive candidates wouldn't necessarily post their resume on Dice or other career websites.
Actually, one of the things that people don't always know is that they think about Dice.com and they say, oh, it's a job site and everybody there is unemployed. It's actually totally not true. More than half of the people that go to Dice have a job. And actually, when times are better, probably close to 3/4 of the people who went to Dice had a job. So Dice is for passive candidates. And some people don't think about that, but it really is. So it's for people that are interested in hearing about opportunities. What might be a little bit different about a social network is that people who are on Dice, when they have a job already, they're open to hearing about something different. And one of the things that we're certainly expecting to have happen in 2011 is more and more people who are employed and want to be open to hearing about more opportunities going forward.
So Terry, would you like to end?
Sure. So the social networking is certainly been another tool that we've utilized. We've seen our placements directly related to that jump 16% this year. Now, it's not a silver bullet. It's going to fill your role for you. There's a lot of work behind it, but it's about creating a recruitment brand. It's about getting your message out there. And if you are going to do the social media route, you have to have a consistent plan where you are constantly talking and communicating with the prospective employees, because it is another way to reach a prospective employee. I think that we have a white paper, and one of my colleagues can grab their information, we can send it off to you, but there was some study done, and 60% of people were surprised. They go online and they search about a company before they apply. Well, from those 60, 54% of them go at least on a social media site once a day. So your ability to interact in a conversation versus the standard, website posting is extraordinary. And your average employee nowadays doesn't believe what's put up on a company's website. That's kind of considered what they want to tell you, right? But through the social media, what other people are saying, others' content, bloggers, others' experiences are much more powerful, and they will affect someone's interest in following you and then subsequently applying to your job. So you get a chance to interact in a different manner than your standard storyboard kind of website. So it's going to be a big trend. It's one we're trying to capture, but there's no real easy way to do it yet.
How do you see it affecting Solvate?
I might be stating the obvious here, but independent professionals don't have a hard line between their personal and professional identities. So guess how they find work? Through their social networks. It's an incredibly exciting time to see how, now that we're all used to social networks, we got it, okay, I get it, my mom's on Facebook, we've got lots of different networks, we're digitally connected, and we kind of understand how to operate and behave on those networks. I am absolutely optimistic and fascinated at the opportunities for us to connect and work. The example you gave may seem like a simple one, but it is so important. Had I been able, 5 years ago when I was searching for a job to say, hey, I'm interested in this company, let me follow it, that would have been absolutely incredible. If you look at what Facebook in particular is doing with opening up their API, LinkedIn not so much, it gets really exciting to see how you can extract from your graphs and even start to source your next freelancer based on their proximity to your graph, right? Say, oh, is there anyone in my network who's recommended a publicist, because that's what I'm looking for. So I think we're at the beginning of an absolutely incredible social digital revolution as it relates to how we work together.
Brilliant. So then I just so Andrew touched on it briefly when he spoke about the performances within different various regions around America. And I think it'd be great if you could give us some indication of how New York is faring, and maybe what measures can be taken to improve it as a tech center.
New York's our biggest market. We have close to 9,000 jobs just in the New York metro area alone. So the second closest one actually is Baltimore, Washington, which is around 6,000 jobs. And then Silicon Valley, which is often compared to, is about half that size, around 4,500 jobs. So interestingly, yeah, right. I think what happened was that the Valley crashed pretty hard, and it's still coming back. Actually, the growth rates are a little bit faster in the Valley than here in New York. That's because the Valley actually crashed harder going back about a year or two ago, and now it's just starting to come back. But still, the jobs, just the number of jobs that are posted on the Dice.com website is about half in Silicon Valley as here in New York. So New York is really a bellwether market.
Is that just tech jobs or?
Yeah, that's just tech jobs.
Okay.
That we post on Dice.com.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. So typically what I would think about is if I'm a candidate, I would really try to focus on my skills more than anything else. If you know certain skills with respect to programming, if you know about network security, if you know about mobile, New York is a great place to come. I think that as long as, from our perspective, if employers look to reach out to those candidates, specifically those hard-to-find skills, they can put those in Dice and then they'll be able to build their needs pretty easily.
I would agree with Tom, and our numbers are pretty similar. New York is our #1 market as well. And I've done a lot of research in comparing the Valley and the Alley, but going online, there are certainly a lot of opinions out there. And the one that stuck out to me was pretty obvious, but the Valley is really one industry, right? There's tech, and they can be different segments of the tech industry, but New York has something that I think it should embrace, which is diversity. And that's why you see 9,000 jobs versus 4,500. So it's not just the new media companies, it's the retail, it's the financial services, it's the healthcare companies. So there's a really vibrant market, and you may have to, as an employer, look outside of your industry for that talent as things get a little tighter and say, you know, they don't have that media experience, but wow, that's a sharp engineer. I'm going to bring them in and cross-pollinate through an industry. And I think that there's quite a market here for the talent.
What do you think, Judy?
I agree. New York is our biggest market as far as our talent network. I think for the reasons you mentioned, New York is the freelance capital of the country. We've got all these amazing world-class industries that are headquartered here with lots of freelancers around them. We've actually spotted a somewhat counterintuitive trend, given that New Yorkers are not cheap to hire. We're seeing business come in from across the country and from our global clients to hire New Yorkers with specific skill sets. The Dance Foundation of Bermuda needed a guy to do their WordPress blog and couldn't find them in Bermuda but found them in New York. An unnamed client in Cupertino needed a user experience person and found them in New York. And I think that is something that we can take a lot of pride in, and I think it's a cool trend to see.
So should we pass the floor over to questions? This is here.
Take mine.
Okay. Yeah, you're not.
If you can just speak up.
Yeah. The question I have is, which kind of fascinates me about how you were comparing Silicon Valley to New York in terms of the posted jobs. See, I think many jobs are not gotten on boards, but through your social networking and when people tap into the hidden job market. And those jobs are never advertised. And so it's purely through your networks. Because they don't want to be inundated. Employers prefer to get people who are referred to them by other people rather than putting them on a job board, and then they're inundated with so many people they can't even handle it. So I'm wondering if the networks are so tight, which I suspect they really are, right? Look at what Google's going through, losing people and everything. They're so tight in certain areas, and everybody knows everybody. They don't do that. They've got their network, right? And so I'm wondering if that isn't a factor, as opposed to the opportunities are there, but they're just not on a board.
Oof.
We need to.
I thought this was going to be a friendly process. Hey, you're absolutely right. That when their jobs should get posted on many different job boards, you're absolutely right. Employers tend to be inundated with non-qualified or aspirational candidates. But that said, one of the things that makes Dice a little bit different than some of the job boards that you may be referring to is that we are just for technology professionals. We don't have as many aspirational candidates that are coming from all over the place. So one of the things that we like to think helps with that problem that you just mentioned is because of the vertical or industry orientation that we have, the types of positions that we have, we don't want to take all of our tech jobs. We don't want to take everyone's tech jobs on, because we realize that would attract the wrong kind of candidate that employers aren't looking for. And the last thing they want is to have their inboxes filled up with aspirational or underqualified candidates. So actually, if you go out to dice.com, you won't find many lower level or introductory or entry level positions. They don't do well. We don't encourage employers to post them. If they most likely don't. And as a result, the candidates that come through, they don't, if they're aspirational, they don't come back. They don't apply for the jobs as often, and they don't put their names in the database as often. So what happens is that the number of applications that you'll get are fewer, but they're much more consistent. Additionally, we also encourage employers and recruiters to search a database because many job seekers have a lot of the same complaints about certain kinds of companies they don't want to work for. If I put my name up, if I put my resume up, I'm going to get bombarded by a bunch of job opportunities I don't want. So for what we found, and we've heard from both sides, so in the middle, that as long as we have a consistently high quality type of job and high quality type of candidate, it tends to work.
If I could just say something there, just as part of NYC Business Solutions recruitment services, if you're inundated with resumes after you do the posting, we'll provide an extra pair of hands to go through those resumes and screen out the ones that are suitable and the ones that are not suitable at all.
My name is Barry Miller. I'm with Patriot University Career Services. I'm often coaching alumni that come back, they've lost their job, and we see all those jobs on the boards, and they're not qualified. And so obviously I'm emphasizing retooling. So I want to get from you guys, because you're talking about this big marketplace, and obviously the reason there's many jobs out there is because some of those jobs are not being filled with qualified candidates. What advice, if you have professionals that need a retool in technology, you should be retooling, what areas would you think they should be emphasizing?
I'll take that one. The fact of people in their career life cycle, I think the first thing they have to do is do an inventory of what skills they have that potentially are applicable to the future. So maybe they're in a legacy technology, but could they be a business analyst? Very hot skill right now. If you can apply your current knowledge, that's the best thing. If not, there has to be training, and there's an ample amount of hot technologies out there, C#, .NET, Java, but just having the training is not going to get you those jobs that are on the board. Right now, the market is still such that there's enough talent out there. They want folks that can walk in the door and hit the ground running. That's the reality. So that's why I emphasize, if you have anything in your skills repertoire that is applicable to a new industry, then you got to take that as a bridge to build off of. So your business analysis, project management, you might have to volunteer for a small business as an intern and build your resume up in that manner so then you can market. So it's not an easy task, but engage with an agency, engage with folks like yourself, and it'll take some time, but it is
So the
something.
internship, suppose, like the interns over 40 type of thinking is really what's needed so they get hands-on skills, why they're not, the companies can't afford to pay, but we want to have those skills.
Right. And charities are another place if you can help with some web design. I mean, there are a number of avenues out there. You have to be out there networking to find them, and really, right now, you have to have the experience for someone to be interested in hiring in the market we're in. Questions?
Hi, I'm Maureen Jack. Just to piggyback on that question, this is way too loud.
You're great.
Just to piggyback on that question, though, the time they spend waiting for that quote ideal person, 6 months, a year, could have brought somebody on board who has 3/4 of the talent and build the rest of it.
Opportunity lost. Sure, that's a valid point. Time to fill for a lot of requirements isn't that long. I'd say currently, even for your most difficult within our business, is about 30 days. An average position within our space can be filled, if the client's ready, within a week.
Yeah, employers have gotten spoiled over the past year or so. There's just a very, very large number of highly qualified candidates for virtually any position that an employer is looking to fill. And for the most part, all employers have at least one or two that they're trying to fill all the time. Some are almost impossible. But they've gotten very choosy, and for the most part, they've been able to find what they want without having to search too hard because of the market conditions.
Oh, here we go.
I haven't quite formulated this question, but it's really about what I guess speaker said in the beginning, and where education is linked with the job market here. I place people, and if I look at the last 5 people we placed, or I placed in the last month, I went through figures today, I've had to sponsor 3 visas. Talent that's grown up here, it's easy to get, it's fine importing talent, but what connection is there between the job market and higher education, especially coming to people like us and saying, what is it that's needed out there? I feel there's somewhat of a huge disconnect. All my PhDs are coming from one place, most of the technology comes from another place, and visas are easy to handle compared to when I came here, but there's a disconnect.
Yeah, I think you're right. I go back to the comment that I was mentioning before, is that it's easy right now fairly easy for employers to find the type of talent they're looking for. And for the most part, what our customers tell us is they're not overly concerned about the education. They're not overly concerned about what actually somebody might bring in terms of what's on paper. What they're concerned about, does somebody have the experience, the skills, and can they do the job looking to get done now? And we find that on-the-job experience is far more important for most employers in terms of looking to get the position.
Let's do 1 or 2 more and then we'll wrap up. Could you describe a profile of why a company would use one of the job boards to try to fill a job versus their own website?
I guess that's for me.
That's for you.
Sure. The easy answer is that companies' websites will track those people that are just interested in working for that company alone. So as an employer, you're just going to be waiting for people to come and apply for a job at that specific company. Whereas if you are an employer that's posting that position on a site like Dice.com, the reach that Dice has into a variety of different areas that will reach candidates that may or may not know of a certain company is much broader. So at Dice.com, when somebody chooses to advertise and promote their position with us, the job not only appears on the Dice.com website, but we also will promote that in a variety of types of websites, a large network of technology-specific sites, to individuals that may or may not have heard of the specific company and would never go to a company's website. So we have employers all the time that ask us that exact question. I said, that's fine, but you're just going to be waiting for those people who only want to work for you, and you're missing out on those that may or may not have heard about you or don't have as much knowledge about you that a site like ours can reach, for otherwise they wouldn't be able to.
Richard, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'd love to. I feel like that's a question that's very much hedged in a framework of Fortune 500 companies. I know about Microsoft, and I want to work at Microsoft, so I'm going to go to their website. And I think that even entering through the front door of a company is a bit of an old behavior versus going to networks of job boards or going through your recruiters or going through your own social network. I think we're undergoing a pretty substantial shift in how people view what they have for sale, what skills they have, and then where they go about seeking placement for it. I mean, do you guys remember a few years ago it was super controversial if you had a blog and you worked at a company? Probably still is for some companies. Oh my God, the rise of the personal brand, and is that going to threaten big companies, right? And now we're talking about figuring out how to sell ourselves and sell ourselves. And how many people here have done sales, are in sales? A decent number. How many people think techies know how to sell themselves? The poor guys need help. So to your point, I mean, we need to figure out how to market ourselves better. And it's not just the resume, and it's not just our work experience. And we don't have to feel so bad about these guys who are having a little bit of trouble with it, because we're undergoing, I think, a much larger shift in how we find jobs and how we view our professional skill sets and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing to answer a little bit further to finish up on that question. So, not only do smaller companies, like ones you described, post on DICE, but virtually any large Fortune 500 tech company you can think of, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, Google, they all post their jobs on DICE. And the reason for that is what I just mentioned. They get a much broader reach of tech professionals than they would otherwise.
And it's why big companies post their products on Amazon, right?
Right. Yeah.
Take one more question.
Yeah, this is sort of a undercut the recruiting thing, but is there a way for people in New York tech to like connect people who are looking with people who are seeking, like a hashtag or something like that?
We have a job board on our website. It's under our resources section, and you know, we've kind of been acting as a broker or a moderator, kind of a word of mouth thing. We also have a LinkedIn group that has a job board, and a Facebook group that has you can post listings on there as well.
Okay, great. So that's to finalize the questions. So just like to give it up for our panelists, Tom from PANELISTS.com.
Thank you, Conor, for moderating. Thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed the program. I just wanted to let you know that there are representatives from the Business Solutions Center scattered throughout the audience. So if you've got any questions about recruiting or the services they offer, please feel free to see CK or one of the other representatives. And please fill out your surveys and leave those and your name badges in the boxes outside here, and we hope to see you at the next event. Thank you.